The panel is called Asia and Pacific Business Environment, Cultural Differences and Local Contacts. It will be moderated by Valda Liepiņa again, and the panelists are Pēteris Vaivars, Andris Eimanis, Olavs Ritenis, and Lāsma Līdaka. Of course. For questions, again, country code 371-266-14779.
What a burst of energy. Now, I am actually going to suggest, because I know it's 2:30, you've been sitting there for half an hour, for a whole hour, would you like to just get up very quickly and shake your legs and whatever, so that you're awake for this next really inspiring panel as well. 2:30 is like the grave shift, so we'll try and keep you awake. Dēļas būs pēc tam pie kafijas. Okay, labi, paldies, thank you. So, Lāsma and I were actually lamenting the fact that we didn't bring our red jackets, but we did notice that Toms had a red tie. Did you also notice that? So that might be the next book, instead of just red jackets, but red jackets and ties. Now we move on to some of the more cultural aspects, the nuances in developing relationships with the people in the various Asian Pacific markets. I remember at the PLAIF in Melbourne, there were comments such as developing relationships, not contracts, with people, that there was a need for people to be flexible, adaptable, and we had a very interesting session 18 months ago also about the use of colours when going into various markets. There were things like white, which for us is purity, and I think it was the Japanese market or the Japanese culture where white was actually more like a funeral colour. So things like that we forget about. So here we have people who have various levels of experience working in the markets or with the various cultures in Asia. And we'll start with Andris Eimanis, who is a project manager of offshore projects. He's not actually been involved in setting up his own business in the Asia-Pacific area, but he has worked with various project teams in this area and has picked up the various cultural nuances, which is in fact the area that you will be concentrating on.
Labdien, mans vārds ir Andris Eimanis. Es turpināšu angliski runāt, jo tas bija šī panela nodevums. So this is what I'm not, as Valda said. I'm actually not a person who sets up business in Asia. Neither am I a cultural expert. What I am, I'm a project manager who's actually worked extensively in the region for the last 25 years. And working on oil and gas projects. So naturally, for me, it's not just purely around schedules, it's not around cost estimates, it's also understanding how to make people work alongside you and work with you in the various regions. And so I've put together a couple of slides on what I've picked up over the many years, and really it's not a one-size-meets-all type of criteria. So, one more slide. I probably won't belabor this, but really my talk today is really around Asia-Pacific, and that can really mean Oceanica, as Martin Štuktāns said this morning. It can mean, of which I'm a proud Australian and a Latvian. Paldies, Martin. Also includes East Asia and Southeast Asia as well. So really the definition is quite broad, and I'll be using APAC rather than Asia-Pacific going forwards. Valda. So really, similarities and differences. It's really about understanding what they both are and being able to use both of those to your best advantage, both in setting up your own businesses or also working alongside local teams. I've worked in Singapore, Korea, I've just spent the last 18 months working for Samsung Heavy Industries in shipbuilding, as well as in Malaysia, as well as lived in Borneo as well, so over the years. So really it's about understanding each of the cultures and each of the business etiquettes, which is really built around religions, beliefs, and their life's philosophies. Look for the similarities between these cultures. Look to exploit these. But then also, the biggest thing is really the differences, which will set you apart, which are really the ones that will actually be your business pitfalls going forwards. And as I mentioned before, the one size does not fit all approach here as well. The elements of culture. These typically may be demonstrated through language. It may be verbal or non-verbal. It may actually include also body language. It also includes hand gestures, like for example, do I point? Sorry, I've got a demonstration. Do I point with my finger or do I point with my thumb? In Malaysia, it's actually rude if you point with your finger. So these are all the small nuances. I remember coming back from Borneo. I was constantly, when I went back to Australia, pointing with my thumb. And my friends are going, what are you doing here? It's all about getting used to and adapting to the local customs and environment. The religion. What is the religion? Is it Buddhism? Is it Islam? Confucianism? What are the local holidays? Hari Raya? Is there Ramadan and other festivals? These all actually have effects on your local business and can and will impact in a large manner. Ramadan can be a big impact to your local businesses. Values and attitudes, manners and customs. These are all the things that I see here, whether it be materialistic items, education. That's a big status is very important in Korea and other APAC countries. What is your education status? That impacts you on where you go, or where you can actually ascend to on a business environment, and what positions you can actually achieve in some of the companies. As well as social elements and aesthetics. So these are actually, when you look around, same whether it be for Australia, same for Latvia as well, or Latvia. Every culture is different and it's built up of those basic elements. Lord Valdea. Really, what needs to be understood? You have to build personal relationships for long-term business success. Ultimately, it's about gaining trust. If you can actually learn a little bit about their culture, and then vice versa, that trust will be built. APAC, or Asia Pacific, it's actually a collectivist society, which really means that groups are above the individual. So that people or personnel socialise in groups, they socialise and also in work. Everything's done as a group, not as individuals. So for example, if you're providing praise, provide praise to a group in a group setting. Maybe if you've got an individual you want to seek out, probably do that more in a private session. Age hierarchy. This is very predominant throughout Southeast Asia. For example, I remember working for Samsung, which I spent probably the last 18 months, and I had a team of around probably 50 Korean engineers working for me. And in one of the comments we had CVs, or curriculum vitae, all in a pile, a nice big thick pile. And I asked, do we have any good ones in there? Oh no, there's none. What do you mean there's no good CVs or suitable candidates? And in the end it was, well, they're all too old. What do you mean they're all too old? Well, they're older than I am, and they actually won't listen to me if I'm their supervisor. So these are all the things you have to actually consider when actually setting up a team. So the age hierarchy is very predominant. Stakeholders or business influencers, what are they? Stakeholders, for example, for Samsung, are not only employees, shareholders, as well as society. I'm just looking at a page where I've got Peciāņiem un tā domāšana vairs nav tik laba. Es mēģinātu to Samsung motto iepriekš. Yeah. Samsung former motto, we do business for the sake of nation building. Australia, switching to Latvian. And I'm finding it quite strange. I've flown in from Australia to be in Latvia, and I'm speaking in English to an audience, so it's a little bit surreal for me. So in Australia, for example, we'd actually never consider nation. That's something that we wouldn't actually consider. It's more for self. Our Lord's Valda. This? Labi. Well, when doing a business in another culture, consider the following. I've got to go after you. Okay, really, I'll go quickly through. Homework is essential. Know who you're dealing with, know what the local customs are, know how business is conducted, and you hear from all the good examples this morning. There have been pitfalls, both through, which are learnt along the way. Some of those are cultural differences, so some are actually purely doing differences in commercial aspects or how they come to a final deal. Impacts of local religion, I've mentioned that. Get the basics right. Understand that, for example, many of the cultures they'll address Mr. and Mrs., whether it be Kim, Park, Lim or whoever, rather than Janis or Peters. Understand business card etiquette, but also when in Rome, do as the Romans do, which is really adapt to, understand and enjoy the local culture. And the more you can do that, the more I think you'll be actually successful. Establish personnel trust and build relationships. Show patience. Lapsnaka gaidishan, all good things take time. So these are the things that you have to build up that level of trust within Southeast Asia. Look, a really big thing in APAC is really saving a losing face. And this can actually lead to, so for example, if you become aggressive or use bullying tactics in your daily dealings, you will then could risk becoming a non-person. And once you become a non-person, really the chance of a recovery is very little, which really means that you'll actually not be dealt with anymore and you'll be ignored, whether it be in a business setting or a social setting. Understand the personal traits of your local employees and really involve the right person. As I said there, don't be a non-person. Be open-minded. As I've travelled all around the world, I've realised it's not the way Andres does business, it's the way the world does business. And many people have actually many good ideas, which I can actually then glean and pass on to the other project teams that I've looked after. Whether it be in Australia, I think the last project was 600 people there, and the previous one about 300. You know, so these are quite large projects, and you can take what you've learned from around the world. Just I'll quickly go through some of these. There's a lot of text on here. There's some of the differences. Western managers, they're actually pretty direct and clear in their instructions. Whereas in APAC, there's more of a suggestion and more about non-verbal clues. Asking questions. We're actually expected to challenge our bosses. Whereas in APAC, subordinates may feel intimidated about asking clarifying questions, or they actually may be seen as challenging authority, and therefore they risk losing face. Dealing with challenges. There is the probably Westerners probably a little bit more direct, and that probably includes the way the Latvian thinking as well, a little bit more direct with minimum of emotional fuss, and we don't really worry about feelings of others. The saying is, it's just business. If it's just business, then get on with it. Whereas, and probably the next page, you won't go to all of these. Okay, here's it. Meaning of yes. I understand yes to mean I've actually made a commitment. I understand. I will actually follow through on this commitment. Whereas in Asia Pacific, yes could actually mean at times, yes, I hear you. Yes, I understand. Yes, I don't understand. Yes, I have to check with somebody else. And and really the way business is done, as many of you know here, in many instances, the perceived agreements still have to actually be agreed to outside of the meeting. And in many instances, the meetings are there for actually sharing of information rather than actually giving of instructions and actually coming to any firm conclusion. And then hierarchies. Being a boss, I probably fall into somewhat of a benevolent dictator type of relationship with my subordinates. And so, you know, we try to convince staff that everybody's opinions count, but in the end, I am accountable and I will still make that decision. Whereas in APAC, it's actually a pretty well-defined class structure. And everyone has to understand their place within that class structure, and so that the word harmony can be maintained. That's actually very visible and very present in the different countries that I've actually worked through Southeast Asia. And then really, I actually did that last comment there. Foreigners are usually given a special and somewhat exalted status and can get away with much more than locals. I'll give you a quick one example, 30 seconds. I sat with the shipyard manager of Samsung, in charge of probably 30,000 employees in a meeting, and I explained a proposal, and he thought it was wonderful. So he came out of the meeting. There was a little bit of shouting which I didn't understand during the meeting, a little bit backwards and forwards, and I was thinking, thank God it's not me. But in the end, I came out and I said to one of the guys that I worked with, and I said, "Why are you looking so sad?" He said, "Well, I told him that 3 weeks ago and he yelled at me." So really, it's all a little bit around the delivery, but also I think sometimes we're probably given probably a little bit more leeway than maybe some of the locals give themselves. So anyway, just a few tidbits. Oh, sorry, and final is enjoy it, working globally, have fun, never judge another culture by the standards of your own, and I think that's very important. And look for the commonalities, respect the differences, and celebrate the diversity. And if you do that, then obviously there's the business platform above that, but really below that you'll actually have probably enjoy your time in whatever country you're in, and Valda's going to ring the bell on me again.
So yes, paldies, Andri, thank you. So our next speaker is Peter Svaivars, who reminded us that after Jāņi, Peter comes. When's that, the 29th? Tomorrow, Peter? Yes, yes, the 29th of June. Yes, okay. He is the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Latvia to Korea. However, prior to being in Korea, Peter's also you were the first ambassador to Japan. So there will be a lot of experience of dealing with, again, two Asian cultures specifically. The similarities and differences, I think, building a lot on what Andris said, and also, the specifics of working as a government representative.
Well, hello. I just want to join those who said that it's really great to be here in Valmiera, and not only when this morning I was driving all the way from Riga, I noticed, wow, indeed, Valmiera is beautiful and everything is green, everything is clean. But also myself, I'm not from the place is not far away from here. I'm boy from Rujena, so it's even from here. I would like to put one more player on a map for business promotion, and this is embassy. We didn't talk about this so much, but indeed in some countries we heard that, like Australia said that there is no embassy. In some countries Latvia has embassies. And I had the opportunity to start two of these embassies, namely in Japan as the first ambassador more than 10 years ago. And then another embassy in Korea a little bit more than 2 years ago. So basically to build network and facilities, not physically, but contact-wise and functionality-wise from the scratch. But I would like to start with just showing this slide to understand why Asia, what is important with Asia. And here you can see that basically economy number 2 in Asia is China. In the world is one country in Asia, it's China, is second biggest economy in the world. Third biggest economy in the world is Japan. And Korea, who is calling themselves a small shrimp between two whales, is actually 10th largest economy in the world. So this potential in Asia is huge. And this is why I would like to encourage, indeed, not to look only on neighboring countries, not to look only on Europe, United States, but also look beyond. And I know it is completely different. You can't communicate in English because guys there in Japan and Korea, they mostly don't speak English. So you have to go to different level of communication. And this is where embassy steps in. This is where one of our functions is. So, already quite a few Latvian companies are present and are doing business in the region, in Japan and in Korea. But to start with, actually, I would like to tell a little bit my feelings in these two geographically and culturally very different places. It seems that they are close geographically to each other, but differences between Korea and Japan are quite large. And in both cases, when I arrived to Tokyo or to Seoul, the main challenge for an embassy and the main challenge for me personally was to tell what is Latvia, because story is that general public, maybe in less extent in Japan, but in Korea very much, they don't know anything about Baltic states. Baltics, Balkans, Latvia, Libya, all the same. I hope Chargé d'Affaires of Korean Embassy is not here, so because I'm a little bit undiplomatic right now. But indeed, so one of very important tasks what we are trying to do, we are trying to do branding, first of all, branding of the country from where we come. And how to do it? So we have to, at first, bring together people. People-to-people contacts is a main thing, and tourism. So tourism is one that is the most important. And after some time, when there is more recognition and more knowledge, we can start really to talk about business, because everyone wants to know where the product comes from, wants to know the country, wants to learn something of the country. So this is a very important task that we are facing, and I would like to say that the situation is changing. For example, last year we had around 30,000 Japanese visiting Latvia as tourists, so it's quite a large number. We had around 10,000 Koreans visiting Latvia as tourists. So more and more they are engaging, and then we have kind of feedback. When I'm back in Seoul, phone is ringing, emails are coming in, and Korean companies are approaching and telling that, oh, I saw on TV, or my friends went to Latvia, they thought that this is a very attractive country, let's seek some business, let's look what we can do together. So this is very, very important. Second thing is, of course, which is extremely important, and this is, again, what was perfectly presented, cultural differences. They are big. They are indeed big, but foreigners are kind of accepted as persons who should not be perfect. Because if you are too perfect, it's a little bit strange. So you should not be perfect, but you have to be understanding to the different culture, to be acceptable to the other culture, not to try to change the place where you are a visitor, to change and say, oh, everything you are doing is wrong. We are doing in Latvia in this way, you should also do in this way, because we are doing right, you are doing wrong. It's not. Both sides are doing right, just different. And this is very, very important thing, how to behave. Another very, very important thing is that you when you are visiting, and it's impossible to sell anything on my knowledge, but embassy is not selling anything. We are kind of wedding agency in some sense. We are not selling anything, but you can't sell product without meeting the person. You can introduce your product, but at the end of the day, anyway, you have to meet with your potential counterpart. Very, very rare occasions in my knowledge when there were success stories without face contact. And in that case, you have to be prepared. You have to have at least name cards. Name cards are essential. Preferably, name cards should be in local language, in Japanese or in Korean. English is still okay, but kind of trust will be much higher if you use local language there. I understand we are approaching. One more thing, don't be afraid, do not hesitate. Embassy is there to help you. As I said, we are not selling anything, we are not buying anything, but we have knowledge, at least how to check your potential partner. We have access to databases. If any company is seeking contact with you, you may always ask us to check, is this company registered, what is the record of this company, and to do such things. Do not hesitate to ask embassy to do some check and suggest potential partners for you. We are doing this, it's part of our job, and it's not only part of our job, it's our interest, because we want Latvia to be a prosperous country, and we are there to help you, and not vice versa. And the third thing is, I think we can do it. This is just to finish with. This red part is Latvian export to Korea. You see it's growing, it's indeed rapidly growing, and the turnover with Korea is already around 100 millions with absolutely positive trade balance. We are selling twice as much to Korea as we are buying from Korea, and more diversity is there, more and more new products are coming to Korea. So everything is possible, and especially Korea is still very conservative in some terms, for example, foods. And this market is opening very slowly, but interest is growing about so-called Western foods, Western articles, Western goods. So there is place. As it was already several times said, if you were 5 years ago and you were rejected, don't mind, try it again, it's different. Every year it's different, and new opportunities are arising both in Korea and Japan. So maybe I will stop here, not to wait for call. Thank you very much.
So this morning we did have the question about what the government is doing to assist with research and development, but now we've had one insight into the side that the government is helping people actually move into the markets. And be followed now by Lāsma Līdaka, who is the head of the representative office of the Latvian Agency of Innovation and Development in Singapore, who again can follow on a little bit on what a one-person link can do in Singapore, what Latvia's image is there, and also perhaps who's there and who are the sorts of people who are taking the leap to try and invest in Singapore.
Yeah, hello. Good news, we are the last panel, so soon you will be free and you can rest. So my name is Lāsma, and I'm representative of Investment Development Agency of Latvia in Singapore, and I'm actually only one there. But my ambassador is sitting there because Ambassador Peters is also covering, is a non-residing ambassador of Singapore up to this month. So what we are doing, Very short about LIA. I think everybody of you, or most of you know, but we have like 4 main functions. We try to help Latvian companies to go to export markets. We assist foreign companies to come and invest in Latvia. Also, recently we also work with tourism promotion, and also we try to be as an innovation agency for young people to generate new ideas and to learn to be as an entrepreneurs. LIA has 18 offices. You saw my colleague from San Francisco, but we also in Asia, as you can see, we have in Japan 2 representatives in China and in Singapore. So I'm probably the most exotic one. Yes, San Francisco is not there, I know. Sorry, that's my mistake. All of you know that Latvia has reached all the big goals we were looking for. We entered European Union, we entered the OECD, NATO, and etc. So what's next? And you know, we are a small but capable country, and the main thing, our economy is very dependent from exports. Our GDP's export shares makes 60%. So we need to go to other markets to develop our country. It's not working. So why Singapore? Singapore is considered as this future city where everything is nice and clean and developed. So it's not the reason. There is not because there is chewing gums is prohibited, but because it's secure, it's efficient, the ease of doing is like excellent, and it's not only in the world, it's in awards, it's also in many ratings. Singapore is like the best or the most developed in Asia, and I think all of us will later tell about it more. And my colleagues were using APEC, Southeast Asia, different terms, and I want to introduce another one, that's ASEAN market. ASEAN market is 10 countries, which I call them Southeast Asia, but the correct term is ASEAN, which makes, why it's important because entrepreneurs in Latvia, everybody wants to go to China, a lot of companies go to China, but these 10 countries, they together are 630 million population market. So this is very significant number, and this market is very new. This market is developing, and it's only will develop in future. So there is, as Ambassador said, there is opportunities to grow even more and export Latvian products even more. So why Singapore? Singapore is a very important investor in Latvia. That's after China, the most important investor in Latvia, and that's probably because Singapore is like financial hub of Asia, and all money from all countries around are kept in Singapore. And also some other statistical data that, yes, South Korea is we are sending a lot of wood and other products to South Korea, but we also are exporting to Southeast Asia. And all these countries which are circled, they sum up quite significant numbers. So this market, that's why it's very important. So what we are doing from LIA side, so we are a government agency under Ministry of Economics, but we are cooperating, of course, with our honorary consuls in the region, with embassies, and all together we are trying to help companies. So we do exhibitions, national pavilions where companies can participate under one umbrella. We do also individual stands, and for example, the previous one was the food exhibition just 2 months ago in Singapore, and why it's very important that potential partners from all regions come to those exhibitions, and companies that's actually very good, already signed agreements with Hong Kong, Malaysia, and other countries around, not only Singapore. That's why this effect of Singapore is multiplied by other countries around. Also, we do trade missions. That was and individual visits. That's also a very recent mission to Malaysia with pharmaceutical delegation, where it was really good results and already agreements has signed. And we also try to do some marketing activities like Christmas design pop-ups and other things. And also another thing, as Ambassador said, nobody knows about Latvia. As I think Baltic countries, Balkan countries, that's really a reality. So we need to participate in tourism exhibitions as well. And what else we do? We do journalist visits, and why it's very important, because they need to come, they need to try, they need to taste, and they need to see the technologies and everything what Latvia can offer. And then there is a result. Beautiful and interesting articles are written, where Latvia is described from the best angles ever. And my small tips, which is already mentioned many times, relationships in Asia is most important thing. That's, as one of the entrepreneurs said before, that he will invite us for the lunch. If you didn't get anything, that's actually the most important thing. You need to go to the lunches, you need to speak with them. You don't need to be friends with them, but you need to be in very respectful relationships, and that's really important in Asia. And also, it's complicated market. There is a high competition, and so you need to prepare. You need to do your homework. You need to research. You need to understand your competitors, and you need to know where you are going. And of course, the personal contact is very important. And my personal surprise in this market was that you really need to do this chasing, professional chasing. If you want to go there, you really need to call, to write, not only one, many times, and maybe then they will reply. But when they will reply, you need to reply in just a moment. That's how they do the business, if you want to do the business there. So thank you very much. And the good news, in Singapore you can speak not only in these all 4 languages, but in English, so you don't need a translator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lasma. And to round off this afternoon's panel, Olavs Ritenis is the founder and CEO of Ventures International Group Singapore. He'll be talking about doing business in Asia, and it's based on 25 years of experience, personal experience, with a focus on the ASEAN area. And I remember, again, in Melbourne, one of your catch cries was, why? Was because Singapore works. So tell us, does Singapore still work?
Thank you, Valda. So here I am, and I'm the last thing standing between you and that cup of caffeine. And also what I'm about to do is to take on the challenge of giving you a presentation that lasted 60 minutes when I gave it at the Riga Business School about 6 months ago. I'm going to try and do it in 10 minutes because I'm very fearful of Valda's bell. Okay, so my focus is really on practical business considerations. Some of these things have already been covered. In fact, Lasma helped me a lot by covering a lot of my material, covering a lot of material on ASEAN, which will help me shorten my pitch. And here we go. So, my background very briefly can be summarized with the 4-letter acronym LUTS. So I'm of Latvian heritage. Australia was my birthplace. My home base is Thailand, and Singapore is my business base. I've had a fair amount of experience of doing business with my own companies in the region, some 25 years plus. I first landed in Singapore in 1991 to start my own software company, and I've been there ever since. And I think it's fair to say that I have learnt the doing business in Asia lesson the hard way, with my own time, my own money, my own capital, my own resources, etc. And there are lots of lessons to learn. As we say in Latvian, skola maksā. And these lessons include things like business culture, relationships we already talked about, and also a big part of my focus is the value of strong local partners. The idea or the concept of not trying to go directly to the end customers, but to work through strong local trustable partners. My company, Ventures International Group, is currently focusing very much on things like capital raising, but we have a fairly wide investor network in Singapore and surrounding countries. But we also focus on running an Asia Gateway market entry program, which enables us to actually help companies come into the Asian markets using Singapore as the gateway. A lot of information here. I'll skip through this fairly quickly. You can read more quickly than I can speak. A couple of key points, however. Everybody wants to go after China and India. In Latvia, there's a lot of talk about getting into these big markets, and of course they're very important markets. We shouldn't ignore them. But as Lasma said, there's also ASEAN, which in itself is a very impressive economic grouping, and it also has a lot less risk, in my view, associated with it than going into China and India. You saw the map of ASEAN, the 10 countries that make up ASEAN. 625 million people. It's bigger than Europe. It's bigger than the US. It's also growing very quickly, 5.2% GDP growth forecast for this year. And interestingly, when we talk about Singapore, which I will do, some 50% or more of foreign direct investment into ASEAN comes via Singapore. So again, it's very much a gateway. It's a regional hub. It's really a good place to start. Fourth largest exporting region in the world, and let me go straight to Singapore because it really is very, very well connected globally in many respects. And one of the points I want to make here is that even in terms of going into China and India, rather than go directly, many of our clients have had the experience of actually using strong local partners in Singapore as a stepping stone. So rather than try to go directly to China and navigate the maze of different types of business people and perhaps less than trustable partners, is to work with a, let's say, Singapore Chinese-based company which has already done the hard work in establishing which are the companies that one can work with in China, let's say. Singapore, I think a lot has been spoken in Latvia about Singapore and what Latvia could learn from Singapore, and there are many lessons because Singapore also is a tiny red dot on the map. It has it's actually 5.6 million population right now, but 20 years ago it had roughly the same population as Latvia at that time, 2-point-something million. And it's done wonders in its 50-year history of independence from Malaya. So, again, you can read all of that. In the interest of time, I'll skip through that slide. A lot of innovation in Singapore, and this is something that, again, I think we really need to look at here in Latvia, is really encouraging innovation, encouraging world's best practice, and really doing a lot of things very differently to how they're being done today, with all due respect. But really, some interesting statistics. It's the highest per capita number of millionaires in Singapore today. Roughly 11% of the population qualifies as millionaires, which is amazing considering that Singapore was still regarded as a developing country some 20 years ago. But very much a gateway to China and India. Ease of doing business. For anybody coming into the markets there, to set up a company, a regional headquarters in Singapore is relatively easy. It's much easier than in most other Asian countries. And as Valda said from the last PLAF, Singapore can be described in 2 words. Singapore works, but it really works in every possible way. A lot of that I've already covered. So some key considerations for selecting partners. Obviously, your whole success in coming into some of these markets will depend on the partner you end up selecting. So you need to firstly figure out what's the best capacity for the partner to have. Is it a reseller, a distributor, a joint venture partner? What form will the relationship take? How suitable are they? What are their real credentials? What's their track record? Do they stack up when the embassy does a check on them? Latvian embassy. What's their focus and commitment? Are they really going to be focused on your product or your service? Are they prepared to invest their time, their money, their resources into helping you do business in the region? Are they trustable? What's their actual reputation? And of course, as we said before, many times, building the relationship. Taking a long-term view of things, not expecting to arrive in the country, 2 days later sign an agreement, and 3 days later be doing business. It takes a lot longer than that to build a trusted relationship. That's the first bell. Okay. So, finishing off on practical suggestions, do your homework. Make sure that you're really ready to go into these markets. Do your market research. Look at what the potential is. Have a very clear view of where you want to take yourself in terms of doing business in the region. And then really do work with people like Leah. Lasma does a fabulous job in Singapore. And she's really raised the visibility of Latvia in Singapore and some of the surrounding markets amazingly well in the last couple of years since she's been there. Use the embassy, as Peter said. These are all organizations that are there to help you, to assist you. Use the Latvian Chamber of Commerce. Use business consulting firms, if it makes sense to do so. A really big thing is, let's create an environment where all of us here, and many who are not here today, including Latvian business people in the Latvian diaspora and so forth, can really form a global community, like the Israelis have done, like the Irish have done, like the Scots have done, and form a really strong global network where we actually have a means to communicate with each other, to connect with each other, to assist each other, and so forth. And that can be done using social media. It's all there. We just need to do it. Somebody needs to drive it. And my side note there is that there are still some things to be done in this area. But it's all possible. And as we Latvians in Thailand say, it's the end of my pitch, and paldies.
So thank you, Olaf. I can see that there are already some questions here. And yes, I guess one of the messages we're hearing is to make use of our networks instead of criticising and lamenting the fact that we have such a large diaspora, to actually make use of it and let those people in the diaspora also participate in the further development of Latvia. So we have some questions. We did actually have that one question from this morning, which was still, does the Asian market reward innovation? But let's just have a look at what we have here. Are there differences between how men and women from Europe are perceived in business in Asia? Peter, here's one that I think you can answer immediately. Will there be a Latvian embassy in Australia? Might be Martin, might be Davids, could be a number of people, I think. So Peter, would you like to answer that before we move on to the others?
Okay, I will try to put this way. If I will say that there will be a Latvian embassy, it will be kind of putting my wishes much above probably what are the decisions and what do decision makers do. I would like to say that we need embassies, and we need as much embassies as possible. Maybe this opinion is not popular at all around, but starting 2 embassies from zero, I really feel that embassy can do a lot. Embassy can do a lot in the branding of a country, and embassy can indeed collect and select information, make networks, accumulate knowledge. So this is what we can do. And being on a spot, it's very different as to try to reach any country from long distance. So I would like to say that we have to have this embassy in Australia. But I am not decision maker, unfortunately, at least outside the embassy.
So thank you. So these two questions were, does the Asian market reward innovation? Are there differences between how men and women are perceived in business in Asia?
In Singapore, there is no. In other countries, there is because you need to understand that ASEAN countries are not the same as European countries. In European Union, I mean, European Union is one market and many different countries, but there is the same regulations or understandable practices. ASEAN market is not the same market. Yeah, there is cultural, religious, and other differences. But in Singapore, I stand out and there is no problem. But in, of course, in Korea, that's a little bit more. I will give Ambassador.
As I mentioned, basically what is kind of tradition or habit for Koreans, it doesn't apply to outsiders, and the same in Japan. So if a business person is coming, a person is received as a business person, is it female or male, it doesn't matter. So basically no problems both in Korea and Japan in this sense.
And it's probably worthwhile remembering what we heard this morning or saw in the map of the US. There are different perceptions in the different areas of the US. If we're talking about the European Union, there's no way that we can say that each country has the same culture. You also have to be different. It's different whether you go to Spain or whether you go to Finland to do business, etc. So I think all of those things that we were talking about this afternoon ring true for any country that we might want to be doing trade or even to live in, is to get to know the local cultures and markets better and people. Are there any questions with the catch box? Now, we had a question here, which I will pass on to the organisers, but I will share with you because I think I owe it to the person who has written it. But I think it's something for PBLA to have a look at themselves. Kāpēc, ja Latvijā uz skatuves ir vairāk latvieši no ārzemēm, viņi savā starpā sarunājas angliski vai runāt Latvijā latviski, skaitās provinciāli? Protams, ka ne, bet es domāju, ka PBLA ir savi iemesli, kāpēc notiek angļu valodā. Bet es esmu tad vismaz dalījusies ar šo jautājumu, kas nāca no kāda dalībnieka. Any catchbox questions? Any questions at all?
Got it. Hi, my name is Christianis. I am from Printful. And first of all, thank you to all the speakers. I think that great job, and it was really informative. And actually I have two questions probably, but we can start with the first one, which is regarding Singapore versus Hong Kong as the regional hub, because we heard a lot about Singapore today, but then maybe you could describe a little bit more into detail the differences between Hong Kong and Singapore, especially if you're going after a market like China. And then the second question was regarding China and India. So we saw in the last presentation there was a short summary about the obstacles of doing business in one country or the other. And if you could just share a little bit more into detail about that, that would be great. Thank you.
Some good questions, Christian. In terms of regional hubs, I mean, to be fair, Singapore and Hong Kong are both regional hubs. As you so correctly stated, the Hong Kong is more a hub for the China markets, and let's face it, that Hong Kong, even though it's a special administrative region of China, it is China. And of course, there are some geopolitical concerns that come along with that, in terms of where companies choose to set up their regional headquarters. Singapore is probably more appropriate for the ASEAN markets, no question. And in various studies that are done by the large consulting firms, comparing Singapore to Hong Kong, comparing everything from business environment and geopolitics and stability and business incentives and so forth, Singapore and Hong Kong are always very close. I think in recent times, Singapore is just slightly ahead of, viewed as being slightly ahead of Hong Kong. But if one's looking to do business in China primarily, use Hong Kong. And in terms of the differences between China and India, was that the question? Yeah. So again, the differences are there. Can I use this? What sounds like a crazy term? There are different differences. They're both massive economies. As in one of my slides, the way to describe the two countries is that in China, the market potential is obvious, but the challenges are less obvious. And in India, it's the other way around. So you really need to figure out where you see the best potential. I think any small company going into either of those markets needs to recognize that a huge amount of time and resource and investment will be required, and definitely don't try to do both at once.
Any more Catchbox questions? Okay, well, PBLA priekšsēdētāja Kristīna Saulīte labprāt atbildētu uz uzstādīto jautājumu.
Jā, paldies par jautājumu pirms tam, kas bija PBLA, un es atbildēšu to latviski, laikam ir jāatbild latviski. Pirmkārt, visi play fórumi visos gados ir notikuši angļu valodā. Tā iemesla pēc, pirmkārt, viņi notikuši dažādās vietās, otrkārt, biznesa kopīgā valoda ir angļu valoda, starptautiskā valoda. Un es zinu, ka latvieši ir ļoti izglītoti un viņi saprot angļu valodā, un tie, kas varbūt nesaprot, tamdēļ arī mums ir šī tulkošana. Tā kā tas nav, ka mēs mēģinam kaut ko nepareizi darīt vai kaut ko savādāk, tā ir vienkārši biznesa valoda. Arī ņemot vērā to, ka mums vienmēr fórumos klāt ir cilvēki, pirmkārt, kas nerunā latviešu valodā, un tas, es domāju, cieņas izrāda. Un otrkārt, ir vērā ņemams, ka šodienas un arī rītdienas panelisti, kas runās, nav lielākoties tādi latvieši, kas ir dzimuši Latvijā. Ļoti daudz no viņiem ir 2. un 3. paudze. Tā kā vispār, ka viņi spēj runāt latviski, es domāju, tas ir ļoti apsveicami. Jā. Paldies.
Okay, any more questions from the auditorium? Any comments from the panel?
Okay, well, Valda, thank you very much. Hang on, you're supposed to go that way because you're going to be thanked over there. Yeah. Thank you so much, fabulous panel. I really feel that we have had our horizons expanded today. So a warm round of applause for this panel and also for all the speakers today. And I have a list of 7 things which I'm meant not to forget to tell you. First one, speed networking, 4 o'clock. Do not be late because it will start at 4 o'clock and it actually will be on stage here. 4 o'clock speed networking. Coffee is first. Second, speakers and panelists invited to a press conference at the same time in the lobby. I guess some are going to be speed networking and are not going to be press conferencing. That's okay. Third, there is an exhibit called Daba Mūsu Paradīze at Hansas Laukums. It will be there until 8 o'clock this evening. That's just when you go outside, I guess, and make a right. Fourth, company exhibits will be there until 6 o'clock. That's in the lobby here, and also in the little room there are the incubator businesses. Fifth, you may have noticed that down the end of the lobby there are a number of tables where you can buy stuff. Those are from socially responsible small businesses and nonprofit organizations. I encourage you to go and pay a visit and see some very interesting things. Sixth, dinner is at 7. And again, we're going to be very Asian punctual. German. Or pick your culture that is punctual. Though we Latvian people are also very punctual. At 7 o'clock, we will begin dinner because there is actually a program of announced and not yet announced interesting surprises and presentations of things. And tomorrow, 7th, at 9 sharp, we are going to kick off with a panel on Choose Latvia. So that's it, and onward to coffee. Thank you.